Welcome, everybody. Professor Lima here. We have a very important guest and a very important session today, which has been the source of many, many questions from all of you. So we decided to have this session, and our distinguished guest is the VP of Atlantis University, Mr. Juan Cruz. Welcome, Mr. Cruz.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here, and this is essentially a topic that is extremely important for us because of our large international community of students.
Yeah, and just, I'll ask you to give us a little bit of an intro from your perspective, what's going on in Miami. But from the career services, when I have interactions with the students, I think most of them have a question or a concern or something around the F1 or the OPT, etc. So I think the session is extremely valuable. So give us a little bit of an intro. What's going on in Miami? What's happening?
Well, just a few days ago, Miami was designated as the most dynamic city in the United States, and that has to do with the growth, not only as far as population, but also the opportunities for employment, the diversity, the different companies, many of them companies that deal with technology, that they're moving in the South Florida area. And so for us and for our international students, it's actually a tremendous plus for them, because that only means better employment opportunities. And because we're located right here in the center of Miami, that also gives all of these international students the ability to come here, to be able to network with all the different companies. You as the point of contact for career services that have an integrated conversation and communication with all these companies, and you actually serve as a liaison helping our students. And so when we offer the benefit to our international students for the OPT, and the OPT extension is extremely important, because this will give them a better opportunity for employment and to continue their careers beyond graduation.
Exactly. And then just a little note before we start the presentation. Thanks for the intro. I think it's very timely. The point is, for those of you in the audience, please keep your questions to the end. We're going to open for questions and answers, obviously, at the end of the presentation. The way we have designed it is a very structured, step-by-step. We're going to have a conversational process, which means we're going to cover quite a lot of material, but in a more conversational way, right? So let's start. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, in addition to, like you said, this is live, so we're actually here with all of our, the audience is important for them to also in the chat, absolutely, if they have some questions, to write in the chat so they don't forget, and we're able to address them at the end of the presentation. Our idea is to answer all of their questions.
Fantastic, very good. So let's get going. So let's talk about the introduction, and I'll leave it to you. The things you're going to cover, the presentation is the students are seeing, or the audience is seeing it. What can you tell us about the SEVP or CV's points that are important?
The SEVP is actually the program for student exchange visitors here in the United States. So in order for us as an institution to be able to provide the I-20, which is actually the document that you need to file to get your visa in your country of origin. And so our institution is approved by SEVP, which allow us to issue the I-20, so our students can then go to the embassy, request the I-20, come to the United States and study with us, unless they're already here and they transfer into other institutions. And what you see here is the different designations by SEVP on our campuses and the information that they have for each one of them. And basically remind people that SEVP is actually the system that we use to maintain all the data and information. The actual program for international students is SEVP. So we'll continue to talk, and we're going to bring you some more details as we go to the presentation.
Very good. So now I wanted to switch to the agencies that are related to the program. I think it's worthwhile just to mention some of these agencies that are involved, because quite a number of them work together to allow the students or manage the students coming to the United States?
What happened with these agencies is that these are really regulatory agencies that oversee the program, right? And with them, we have the Department of Homeland Security, which is the overall department that manage everything that has to do with CVIS and the State Department and others, no? Institution Designated School Official, DSO, is the actual person from the institution that issues the I-20 and maintain the data in the CVIS system to make sure that everything in there is up to date. We have ICE. Everybody's, if you're not familiar with ICE, these are the people that deal with immigration in the United States. The U.S. Department of State, because the Department of State is actually the department that issues the I-20 when you go to the embassies. They're in charge of that. The Border Patrol, because when applicants come into the United States, it doesn't matter where the port of entry, whether they come to Miami, they come to Palm Beach, New York. And at the end, what we're going to do is that we're going to help you guys. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll continue with that. And then the USCIS, which is the agency in charge of the United States Citizen and Immigration Services. We have the Student Exchange Visitor Program, SEVP, which also has an enforcement agency or a division that deals with anything that is any investigation on any of our students is done by this particular group, which is part of the National Security Act of, and it's a bridge among the government agencies and CVIS, because all of this, since this is actually a legal matter, then that's the department that managed that.
Right, exactly. And another thing I always tell the students when they come to talk to me about career services opportunities as an international student is that this is a privilege that the United States government gives to them to use their knowledge that they gain in the university to put into practice. That's what we call optional practical training. It's just the opportunity. Not all the countries have that, and there's an opportunity that they have when they come to the United States to use what they have learned in some capacity in a business. Now, following along, so types of visas. So give us a little bit of the understanding of what the F1 and the options that are available that are related to student employment.
Well, these are issues that we're going to cover in detail, each one of them. One of them is on-campus employment. When students come to the United States, many of them, one of the things they would like to do is to work. And so on-campus employment is the actual only option they have unless otherwise authorized by the USCIS to work. But it's an option, and as long as the institution or the campus they're in have an employment opportunity, they can do it. There's some restrictions, and we're going to talk about that. The other one is off-campus employment, curricular practical training, which we as an institution do not offer it. And the reason for that is because none of our programs actually require practical training. Say, for instance, a nurse, and that nurse needs to go to a hospital and do their practical training for 6 months. That is part of the curriculum, therefore it's a requirement for them to work. We do not. Our programs as of today do not require what is called practical training, so essentially, or curriculum practical training, so we don't offer that. Optional practical training, we're going to speak in detail about that area because that includes all of our students, and also the M1 practical training, which normally is a student visa that has more restrictions to it because it's normally for technical programs, short-term programs. We hardly ever use it because the majority of the students, they come here to complete academic programs. Therefore, the F1 is the better option for those students.
Right. Fantastic. So in terms of the introduction, I think that on-campus employment, so tell us a little bit more about the opportunities or the limitations on on-campus employment.
Normally, every institution have different policies, but in reality, when someone works on campus, what happens is that we don't have to report that to USCIS, so it doesn't, or CVIS, it doesn't require any additional permissions to get to work on campus. However, there is 2 restrictions. Number 1, the maximum amount of hours that a student can work on campus is 20 hours. And number 2, those 20 hours cannot interfere with the class schedule. And so in order for you to work, if that opportunity is available to you, then you must work when you have no classes. So those are the two restrictions, and the other is obviously the job opportunity has to be open, and a lot of schools require for the students to complete one semester, some an academic year, before they actually become eligible to work on campus. So it depends on that, but the most important part here is availability. If we have the opportunity, the job is available, what we normally do is that we post the jobs,
Right.
so students have access and they can apply, and they go to an interview process, which is also an exercise that is good for them because they go to interviews, and this way they gain experience. So when they finally apply for OPT and go outside the institution, they are in so many ways familiar with the process of hiring in the United States, which is a lot different than other countries.
Right, and that's a good point that I always talk to the students about, that the on-campus employment has, as any other employment, an interview process. So it's not a done deal that you're going to get an employment. You're going to have a process that you're going to participate or not, and the decision maker, the hiring manager, will make a decision about the best person, the best candidate for that position. As you said, I think it's tremendous opportunity for people that come from a different country to start, understanding the working environment in the United States before they go outside and they put themselves into.
And that's a very good point, because
yeah.
one of the things that you prepare the students
Right.
to do is to compete.
Right.
Because when they go outside, they may apply for a position and another 20 people may have applied for the
Right.
same one. So they have to be prepared for that interview.
exactly.
And in our case, we may have 10 students applying for a position. So we interview them and we select what we consider to be the candidate that is best prepared for the job.
Exactly.
And that's how we do it. And whenever they go to any company, the process is going to be the same. They're going to select whoever they think is their best option.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great points. So in terms of off-campus employment, give us a little bit of the options and
Normally, for any student that comes into the United States, the option of working off campus is only available if they receive what is called a work permit from USCIS. And this takes a process of an application, and it's not available to every student, and they have to complete, first and foremost, one full academic year before they become eligible. Now, exceptions to this are, for example, the United States has a list of countries that they have waiver and they can apply because of issues in that particular country. For example, war-torn countries, countries that have gone to catastrophes, like, for example, Haiti, all these earthquakes. And so those students are given an opportunity for what is called extreme hardship because of the situation.
Right.
And so that's the only time that they would apply, but they have to meet the requirements. Now, people who come to the institution thinking that they're going to spend a year and they're going to apply, it doesn't work like that. They're only authorized to work if eligible based on what USCIS and CVIS determines is eligibility criteria.
Exactly, and another very important point, because it covers a lot of the misunderstandings, right? The people sometimes come thinking that is an immediate thing, that is a done deal, and nothing is a done deal. It's always a process that needs to go through, or interview process, or eligibility, criteria, etc., that you can apply and you can participate, right?
Keep in mind too, when you apply to USCIS, it's not free.
Right.
There are always fees for you to process applications with the U.S. government, so there's also expenditures that go along with that application. And so what we try to do is to make sure that whenever a student applies, if they're eligible, that we sort of guide them through, make sure they're eligible, that they apply, they do the submission, because they still have to have the endorsement from the DSO. In other words, if they don't get the signature from the DSO, if they submit it without it, they're going to be denied, because part of the requirement is that we have to endorse it. So normally they'll have a conversation with us. We'll explain to them, hey, you are eligible, you're not, you need to wait, whatever the case may be. And so we try our best to make sure that when they apply, they're eligible, so they have a better chance of being selected and approved.
Right. Well, fantastic. So let's look a little bit about the CPT. A lot of questions come about CPT. I think you already covered a little bit about it.
Well, I can go into details.
Yeah.
The CPT is curriculum practical training. What that really means is that it is a requirement for that student to have that practical application to graduate. And as I was explaining before, we don't have that because none of our programs require practical application in order for our students to graduate. Therefore, we do not at this time issue any CPTs. Some schools do, and some schools will come in and they will automatically begin the students to work immediately. And to us, it has been an issue because students, a lot of times when they come to the U.S., the priority is for them to complete their academic program so they can enjoy. And another thing is that if they do 1 year of CPT and they go beyond that, that automatically disqualifies them for the CPT. So you have to watch this. In our case, it's irrelevant because we don't offer it, and we offer the CPT, and there are two versions that we're going to talk about, the the OPT later, which is the pre-graduation and the post-graduation OPT, and how that affects their work and their extensions later.
Right. Okay. So, well, I think we covered that already based on your points. I wanted to move that one. So let's go to the OPT, the real start of the show. So tell us a little bit about it.
This right here is something that our students need to really understand because it's a tremendous benefit in many different ways, okay? And so the optional practical training is optional because the student doesn't have to do it. It's not a requirement. But obviously, if they're here, it's a benefit, and we want to make sure that they take advantage of that benefit. So pre-OPT, which means for you to apply for OPT prior to your graduation, you can do it. You have to complete at least one academic year before you become eligible for pre-OPT. It's not something that you come in and you say, well, I want to do my pre-OPT. Well, you can't until at least the completion of one full academic year. Now, there's a restriction because any student that is approved for pre-OPT can only work up to a maximum of 20 hours per week. Consequently, for every 2 months that you work on pre-OPT, you lose 1 month of post-OPT.
Right.
Now, what that means is this. Let's just say that you work for 12 months on your pre-OPT. When you actually graduate and you apply for your post-OPT, you can only work for a total of 6 months because you work 12, and they take for every 2 months, 1 month deduction for the 12 months OPT. So there is a penalty, and it can affect you. And most students like to take the full advantage of working the 12 months consecutively full time. The part-time also is challenging because a lot of companies don't want to hire their students part-time. They want full-time employees, and that becomes an issue. Then they end up in some ways losing some of their time that can be better used when they graduate. Now, and again, once you apply for OPT, like anything else, you have to be endorsed by the DSO, and you have to complete an application, which now is done 100% online, and it expedites the process tremendously. Before, you used to have to be mailed in and wait for answers. Now, you submit it, you complete your application instantly, you take care, and it's submitted. So that helps us making sure that the students, receive a quicker response. However, no guarantees. Normally at 8 to 12 weeks is what we look for. We have students that got approved in 5 and 6 weeks, and you have students that have taken 6 months to be approved, because once it's submitted, it's up to the U.S. government, and then we have no ways to accelerate that, right? So what happens with the post-OPT is that there is an option for the students as to when they want to start their OPT. And I'm going to slow down because this is something that always causes difficulties. Number one, when you apply for the OPT, USCIS, what their policy is that you must complete the OPT within 14 months of your graduation or last day of class. What that means is that they give you a 60-day window, or 2 months after you complete the last day of class to begin work. Now, you have the option to graduate today and start your OPT tomorrow. And you also have the option to start a month later, 45 days later, up to a maximum of 60 days after you complete your last day of class, which will allow you to complete to a maximum of 14 months your OPT, because your OPT is 12 months. So that's clear. Now, the application is where people get confused. You have to submit your application within 90 days or less of when you're going to begin the OPT. So let's slow down and let me explain what that means. If you plan to start working the day after you graduate and complete your last day of class, then you have to submit your application within 90 days of the day that you have to or you want to start working. However, if you're going to work a month later or 2 months later, the full 60 days, then your application has to be submitted within the last 30 days of classes, which will put you within the 90-day window from the day that you want to begin. One thing that is really important is during the process of your application, you cannot leave the country. And so a lot of people, after they graduate from the from the institution, they get their diploma, they like to take a little bit of time off, go home. However, if you have submitted already your application for your OPT, if you leave the country, the U.S. government will interpret that as you abandoning your application, and when they adjudicate it, they will deny it for abandonment. So once you submit your application, you have to stay here in the U.S. until it's adjudicated, and then when it's approved, you receive your work permit, and you're going to receive your Social Security, which is an extremely important document because the Social Security stays with you for the rest of your life. And eventually, if you go through the process of becoming a resident and even a citizen, that will never change, and it will maintain your paying records for working until the time of your retirement. So this is a tremendous advantage and a huge plus for our students, because you're talking about working for 1 full year. You're not limited. This is another thing that a few years ago changed.
Right.
There used to be a restriction that you can only work at one job at a time. They removed that. So now you can work for 2, 3 companies. You know, there is no limit in the amount of hours that you can work, which, you know, for a lot of our students, if they can work 2 jobs, that's perfectly fine. However, there is a process of compensation based on education. So you can, and the job that you do has to be directly related to your study. So if you study in business, you have to work in business. If you study in information technology, you have to work in that. If you're education, etc. And the next step that we're going to talk about is the STEM. Now, this is a huge benefit because it actually adds an additional 24 months of OPT. So essentially, students who are qualified for the STEM, which, you know, for those of you who are familiar or not, we're talking about, you know, science, technology, engineering, and math degrees. If you guys are qualified for apply for the STEM, then you can also, once you complete your OPT, add 24 more months of employment in the United States. Now, those total 36 months will bring you an opportunity of gaining a tremendous amount of experience, compensation, and in addition to that, you're going to have an opportunity to later apply for other type of visas while you're there. But I don't want to get into that right now. That's later, okay? First, the process. And so the difference is that when you apply for the STEM extension, you have to have a form that is given to the employees or employers that you have to also submit with your application, in which that employer basically states that they will hire you for the next 2 years. So when you apply for the OPT, you don't need to be employed by anybody. However, when you apply for the STEM, you have to show proof that you have a company that actually provides you a job, employment, and offer for the next 2 years. Keep this in mind. The fact that you take that job and you have an offer from that company for 2 years doesn't necessarily require for you to stay with them. You can actually begin with them and switch, but you have to report the change. And that's that's very important because I don't want them to think that for the next 2 years they have to stick to a particular company. You don't. But for the application process, you're not allowed to change employers. So, for example, in those 90 days that they're going to process, you can't. Now, there's a big benefit also, and that is when you apply from their regular OPT to the STEM OPT, you have the same rule of 90 days. The last 90 days, however, remember that the STEM begins the day after your OPT finish. So in this particular case, there is no window. You have to submit your application within the last 90 days of your OPT, so you're then eligible. If you submit that application the day after, the last day after your OPT finish, you're automatically disqualified. You have to be on the active OPT in order to be eligible to apply for the OPT. So this is information that you need to know, and again, we're here to assist you. So the DSO, designated school official, the PDSO, in this case myself, which is the principal DSO, we're here to assist you, but always keep in mind that ultimately USCIS holds you, the student, which is the applicant, 100% responsible for the accuracy of your application. So if you make a mistake in it, even if you hire a lawyer, which you don't need to, but even if you decide to do, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, USCIS will make you 100% responsible because you're the applicant, you're the person submitting that application. So keep that in mind. What we try to do is the best we can assist you to make sure that when you submit the application, you do it right and you have all the required documentation to submit your application. And so that gives them a pretty good view of what they need for the OPT. Now, one of the things that we have done for many years, for example, we have students in the MBA, the Master's in Business Administration, which normally is not eligible for the STEM because it's business. However, we have an MBA that includes, in addition to the program, also the concentration in business intelligence. And if you do that extension, that will make you eligible to apply because now your master's has a concentration in technology, which makes you eligible for the STEM OPT. And we have a lot of students, many, especially our international students, that once they get here, they realize, hey, I can work, an extra 24 months. So they'll go ahead and do the concentration rather than switching programs. And so that's a tremendous benefit to them. Okay, so I think that pretty much cover both the pre and the post OPT.
I think it was great. And I always tell the students when we talk about job opportunities, and I post the jobs that we have the relation with companies, that they need to be aware and ask questions. Come to see us, to see you, to see Olena as a DSO in the international department. Ask questions, understand the process, the times that are available. Because as you said, if they miss the deadlines, then maybe too late.
Correct.
So the secret sauce, which I always tell them, is that understand the process well and well in advance, way ahead of time. So when it comes a time to do things, all the options. A lot of students come to see me in career service and they ask me about what should I do? I say, well, what I tell them to do is what you should really do is understand what is available, because the decision is yours when you're going to apply or not apply, etc. But if you don't understand and you miss a deadline and something happens, or you travel and, for example, if the USCIS send you something that a correction and you're not available, you miss the return time, then you may be disqualified. So all those things is a problem because all of a sudden you come with an answer that is negative, and there is a reason for that, right?
Yes, I would make two reference to your point. Number one, whenever USCIS send a document that is called an I-797 for what is called a request for evidence, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's simply, in order for them to complete your process, they may need another document. And normally that documentation has a deadline to respond. And if you don't respond normally within 30 days, automatically they deny it because you did not respond to the actual request. But that's something that we do. The other advice that I will give all of our students is to everybody likes to talk about CVS and all this. My advice to you is go to the source. Make sure that when you receive information, you receive it from someone that is qualified,
Right.
not necessarily another student, because they could very well receive bad information or misinterpret something. And if you want to read it, you can
Exactly.
go to the USCIS
Right.
website, find the answers yourself. And there is an old sentence that says, if in doubt, ask questions.
Right.
And so in this particular case, if you're not sure, ask before you submit or you fail to comply.
Right.
Because that's the key here. Remember, as an international student, you have to stay in compliance 100% of the time. That
Yes.
means your attendance. That means maintaining GPA. That means making sure that you're not working illegally or doing anything that is inappropriate and will place your status outside what is called in compliance. And that becomes a real issue,
Right.
not just now, but later. Because what a lot of people don't understand is that you may be now thinking that it's not a big deal. But if you ever have an opportunity to become a resident, it becomes a huge deal, because everything that you do can be and is documented. And so now they begin to ask questions, and that can derail that opportunity.
Right.
So doing the right thing sometimes is not the easiest way to do it, but always strive, do it right, and at the end, you will see the benefit from it.
Exactly. So I think it's very well, we covered it. No, I think we need also to talk a little bit about the cap gap. And I think you'll talk about the last bullet already, but the cap gap OPT extension for student employer when they go to the H-1B.
Correct. Let's talk about that for a second. And let's, what happens is when you are normally on the extension, right,
Right.
and you work for a company, and as an employee, you are an outstanding employee, and they want to keep you, right? They have the option to request you as an H-1B, which is a request for a work visa. And what happens is they request a change of status from the F1 to the H-1B. Now, this is a very competitive process, but we have been successful, and every year we have students that actually have been selected to the H-1. And what I'm going to mention to you guys is something that if you could note this, write it somewhere or put it somewhere. I know all of you are, high tech with your phones. Write it somewhere in there. There is what is called the general applications, and then there is also the applications, which is the cap that is kept only for national institutions, public institutions, and nonprofit. We are a for-profit. Therefore, what is called the general application is what you submit that covers 80%. That other 20% is reserved for a particular group of students, which is the general cap, I think is what it's called.
Right.
So you have to make sure they remember that, because we have, when you apply, and you do this one in particular through a lawyer, they have to do it correct. So even if you're not sure, ask first, okay? So the gap is simply an authorization. So if you're doing your OPT and they request an H-1B, you're allowed to work up to 180 days after the completion of your OPT, pending the decision, which is normally done in September. And the application is submitted right around March. So by the middle of March, or I believe the 1st of April, is when all the applications have to be submitted. From there, they select X amount, and from that amount, eventually, they're going to select the total number available. And because the decision is pending for the summer, if you are in there, you're allowed to work until the adjudication and the selection of the visas. So that's a process that you guys can work with that. So, and that's what the cap gap is. It's a 6-month, 180-day period that is given to our students that are doing OPT, so they can wait for the adjudication or the selection of the H-1Bs. Now, what happens is, if you're not approved, automatically, they're going to give you a short period of time to either go back to another school or you need to return back to your country, because if not, you'll be staying in the United States illegally, and that's going to also cause issues.
Right.
Okay?
Exactly.
And also, keep in mind, the OPT can only be authorized by USCIS. The only thing that we do is endorse it. so that when you submit your I-20, we are endorsing and approving the work period, because that's what they're going to approve. So we have to put in your I-20 when you submit it, when is the selected work period for you to do your OPT. But the selection and the decision is actually the United States government. We don't do that, so keep that in mind. However, unless there is something wrong with the application, in my experience, every one of them gets approved, unless something happened that we're not aware of it and there is an issue. And when that happens, they'll normally request evidence to clarify whatever issues might be stopping your application from getting through.
Right, exactly. So, well, one thing I want to ask you also that comes before we go to the next page here, it's about there's a lot of students that say when you move from the BS degree, the bachelor's to master's, and you got an additional OPT or no addition, or transition from one program to another, if you add another year or not, or I think there's some laws. Can you give us a little bit of a understanding of that?
And I thank you for reminding me that, because I didn't touch on that, and I think that's a very important point. What happens is that OPT is available for all levels, from the associate's, the bachelor's, the master's, and the doctoral degree. So you can literally do 12 months in each one of these, right? However, the associate's degree is not eligible for the STEM. So you can only do 12 months and you're done. And you have to go back to school to get your bachelor's. However, once you get your bachelor's, you can then do the STEM if the program that you have qualifies you for the STEM. And as of right now, you're also eligible to do the STEM twice. So if you do it in the bachelor's degree, you complete the bachelor's, do your 12 months OPT, and then you do your 24-month extension. Once you complete that, you want to come back to school, do your master's, well, you can repeat the entire process. But the STEM is only available twice. So if you do it on your bachelor's and you're doing your master's and you decide to continue to a doctoral degree, then you would only do the 12 months because you had already used twice the actual STEM extension. And so that's very critical. Another thing to remember is it has to be ascending. In other words, you can't go and do a master's and then go back to another school to do the bachelor's, because they're not going to approve it. It used to be that you could, but now we have a couple cases of people who have gone to some universities, they go to another university or even the same one, and they do, for example, the master's, and they go back to try to do the bachelor's, and they normally don't approve it. It's ascending: associate's, bachelor's, master's, doctoral. So please keep that in mind. So if you already did your master's, then the next step will be to do a doctoral, and if it's a STEM program, that particular program, doctoral, and then you can also do your extension if you have only done it once.
Yeah, that's a very valuable information, because there's a lot of confusion about this thing of changing programs or degrees, levels of degrees, bachelor to master's back to bachelor, what I get, what I lose, what I come. I think it's extremely valuable. But again, I think fits into the category of asking questions.
Right. I want to make a clarification. You can actually go back to school and do a doctoral and do a bachelor's, and then any way you want to. However, the eligibility for the OPT is what's in question. So you can go to Atlantis University, you get your master's, and you can come back and do a bachelor's and associate's. That's perfectly legal. The only issue is eligibility for the OPT.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So before we open to questions, we have here just the applying to the OPT and job search. These I give to the students a little bit from a career service perspective, the alternatives that you have. If I netted out this page to you is you start looking for jobs and looking for the companies or careers, etc., that you want to approach way before your graduation. So when comes, I usually say my rule of thumb is anywhere between, depends on how you consider things, 9 months before your graduation time. You are looking for the careers, the companies, the kinds of jobs, etc. And then in that time, you have plenty of time to understand well the OPT and the STEM, etc. So the time comes and you apply for the OPT, you already have something going on. One of the challenges that we have with the students is that they say, well, but what about if I apply for a job, I don't have the OPT approved? and then the employer wants to hire me tomorrow. Well, that's a necessary or sometimes an occurrence that happens that needs to be managed. There's multiple ways you can manage that in terms of you didn't finish the school yet, or you're doing a project, because that could be the case. You don't have that documentation yet.
That's a very good point, and I'm going to go into the legal aspect and responsibility of the actual employer.
Right.
If you have applied for OPT and you go to the process of interviews, it's always important to let them know when is it that you are expected to be approved so you can actually begin to work. However, say for instance that they're late and you're supposed to begin on the 30th of May and you still have not received your work permit and also your Social Security. Well, you cannot work until you have that document at hand, because SEVP requires for any company that hires a student that they use what is called electronic verification. And when you submit for, what they're doing is checking that the person is legally eligible to work. And you have to submit that work permit. So at that point, when they do that e-verification, if you don't have that document, the company is legally cannot hire you. And so make sure that you talk to the potential employee, let them know, hey, listen, I'm expected to work at this day, I should be receiving it. So when you walk in already, they will know when you're going to be eligible to come to work, and they don't tell you, well, if you don't start tomorrow, we can hire you, because they would already know, when you're going to be eligible. And in the United States, the process of hiring is not one day to the next. Sometimes this process takes months.
Yes, exactly.
And so it's important for you to be able to work on this process even at the time or before you do your submission for the actual OPT, to give you enough time to go out there, apply for different positions. Remember, just because a company gave you an opportunity, that doesn't mean that you can go to others to see if you get a better offer.
Right.
So you can go out there and shop for employment and see which one is to your best interest, whether it be work schedules, whether it be sometimes working from home, whether it be salaries, because all that compensation is also important. But remember, if you don't have the work document and the Social Security, you are not eligible to work until they're in your hands physically.
Yeah. One thing I'm going to tell you that's also happened in a couple cases with students is that they had the date of the approval in CVs, but they have not received yet the card, right? The employment authorization card. And they need to have the documentation in hand to just make sure that they go to the employer. And sometimes it takes, I kind of did a little bit of the math. It took about 15 days to come the card to come to the student in general, but obviously some cases are different, right?
Now that you mentioned that, one little detail. Remember that when you submit this application, it's going to be mailed to your address. So if you move between the time that you do your submission and the time that they send the document, that document is going to be sent to the wrong location. And if you don't receive the document and it's lost because the people who moved there don't know you, they return it, whatever the case may be, you are going to lose all that time and you cannot work because the document is not in your hands. So please make sure that when you submit this application and you submit it to be returned to a particular address, that you are going to have access to that mail that comes to that location. Or if the case is that you move, then you got to make sure that you go to your application and update your address so that the system will have the new address and they'll mail it to the correct address. This happens more often than you think. Students move, all of a sudden, the application is sent and they receive the documents and they call CVS and they'll tell them, USCIS tell them, we mailed your application a month ago, but they mail it to your old location. And now you really have an issue because you have to request for them to reorder it, and that could take another month and a half. And so you're losing all this time. So please make sure that whenever you submit the address where the card is going to go to, that you're going to have access to that address and retrieve it so you'll have it.
Exactly. No, excellent points. Now, this is just I don't think we need to cover that. I think there's a lot of types of visas. And more often than not, when people go to the F1 and they start looking for opportunities, there's so many options, right? And I always tell them, you need to work with a lawyer from the F1 when you're already finishing. You try to apply H1, EB1, EB2, EB5, EB something, O, etc. It's a huge amount of alternatives. Many of them you may or may not qualify. So that only person that can tell you that is a qualified person, a lawyer, an immigration lawyer, that you have to visit, and then it can give you directions of options, right? But other than that, you won't be able to navigate by yourself.
Right. While you are working with the F1, it's not a requirement for you to have an attorney. You can always get legal advice, but from my own personal experience, at least 95, probably 97, 98% of all the people who have submitted their application for OPT, they done it in their own, by themselves, with the advice of the DSO. They always have the prerogative to hire an attorney, but it's not really necessary. You know, it's up to you guys if you want to do it. However, when you begin to work with the H-1B, it's required to have an attorney because you cannot submit it. It has to be submitted by the corporation or your employer, and they have to do it through a lawyer. And so at that point, you are going to have to make sure that you work with that lawyer. And normally, companies are the one that sponsor that. And right now, the cost is between $10,000 to $12,000. And most companies will, pay for the fees. And that's why once you submit it, you are now required to work for that company for the next 3 years. When you get your H-1B and that company is actually paying for your services and that application, unlike the OPT extension that you can have a sponsor going into the request, when you go into H-1B, if you drop the employer, you lose your visa.
Right.
So you have to remain, you have to stay working with them. And again, we're way ahead of ourselves because that's something that you guys are going to be dealing with that in the future. But just as a reference, because you're going to need to have the assistance of an attorney that can help you with your legal questions.
Right. Well, now we have the main presentation completed. Thanks, Mr. Cruz. We are open for questions from the audience that can send it to us via chat or just on the audio, and I'll just defer to Mr. Cruz to answer questions.
One thing, I don't know if we can actually look at the questions from the chat. So if we have any questions, we can quickly answer them. I don't know if we can. And the other one is anyone who has any questions that they can go ahead and ask. As I was saying, we're here live, and we want to make sure we answer your questions. So don't be shy. Ask your questions. This is your chance.
Exactly.
Mr. Cruz, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, actually, we've been in contact. We've been getting a lot of questions through the chat. We've been answering most of them. But if anyone does feel that they want to ask more questions, please feel free. This is the time, whether it is on the voice or the chat.
You know what, Jose? If you could, can you read some of the questions? Because this way I can go ahead and answer them for the benefit of all of the people who are attending and not necessarily the one person that has that question.
Magnificent. Yes, sir. If you give me a second here, let me go up to the first question. So one of the questions is, how much is the cost for the STEM MBA? Can you hear me?
I can hear. The thing about the STEM MBA and what I would advise people to do is, rather than me sitting here and giving prices, I don't think that's adequate. I think that they need to contact our admissions personnel so you can give them the details of what the cost is, because it involves a lot of different things. And so this way, this is a question that I really don't feel there is the right place to do it. But contact admissions, and in this particular case, Jose, take the name of the individual, reach out to them, and give them all the detailed information as far as the cost of the credits, the length of the program, what is the curriculum of the program, the cost of the program, because there are also associated costs, and also students who may qualify for scholarship, and that can change the cost to them. So it's difficult for me to say, because I don't want to quote a price and then all of a sudden could be something else. So we want to be detailed, have that person information, take care of it, contact them directly, and then have the opportunity to answer every one of their questions individually.
Right.
Understood. Another question that we have that is a great one. Can I get a waiver for the application fee? And the answer to that, Mr. Cruz, we've already responded that all of the participants that are now in the info section, if they go to our website and apply now as of today, they will receive application fee waiver. So if you guys go on our website, www.atlantisuniversity.edu, you will see that once you come up to the website, you will have an option to apply now. If you do so, from the info section that we're giving you as of today, you will receive application fee waiver.
Okay, so that's pretty clear. Those of you who are here today are going to receive an extra benefit, which means that you will not have to pay the application fee. You can submit it, and with that, we can help you and then get somebody from admissions to reach out to you, give you details, whatever you may need, so that we can assist you. For those who are participating here today, you do not have to pay. It will be waiver for your application fee. Jose, another question?
Yes, sir. I have another question here is, my transcripts are in English. Will you evaluate them in-house?
There's two processes to our transcripts when international students apply, and that's the requirement by the Department of Education. Number one, if your transcript is already in English, you don't have to translate. If it is in any other language than English, Spanish, for instance, now you have two things that you need to do. Number one, it has to be translated, and it has to be translated by an agency that is recognized by the Department of Education here in Florida, and we have many agencies here that we work with. Now, the second part is what is called the evaluation. And so if you already have a transcript that is in English, what we need to do now is to evaluate that is equivalent to, for example, if you're going to apply for a master's degree, the requirement is for you to have a bachelor's degree. So some countries have degrees, bachelors, that are 3 years. A requirement for the bachelor's degree is for the students to have a 4-year degree, 120 plus credits to apply. So when you do the evaluation, it's simply going to determine what is the equivalent of the degree that you have to a bachelor's in the United States. And what normally happens is that evaluations determine that the degree that you have, a bachelor's in your country, is also recognized in the United States or equivalent to a bachelor's degree. Thus, you now meet the eligibility for that particular degree you're searching, in this case, a master's degree. Go ahead, Jose.
Excellent. I have another question here, Mr. Cruz. What about the MBA concentration in IT? Does it apply for STEM option?
Yes. When you have a concentration, that concentration requires for you to have at least a total of 18 credits in a particular field, in this case, IT. And so once you do that, it doesn't matter whether it's information technology or if it is in business, as long as those classes are technology dedicated, then we can make the case that that program is eligible to apply for the STEM.
Excellent. Excellent. Mr. Cruz, I have another question here, but this is more, I was not able to see how I can answer, but maybe you can. I tried to search in Duolingo. I guess this person did Duolingo, the examination, and usually they're able to put the school's name so they can send the results to the university. And for some reason, he says that I tried searching the Duolingo website now by university name, and Atlantis University can be found.
It's difficult to do that because it should be there. I mean, the easiest way for the person to do is they can go to the Department of Education, and they can go through our accreditation, or they can go directly to our website, and from there, they will have the credentials that they need so they can submit it to Duolingo and then be able to go ahead and transfer whatever certificate they may have.
Right. I did tell them as well that they can always send it to one of our emails in admissions so that we can just go ahead and process that for them.
And in this particular case, my advice will be to reach out to admissions so that we can give them the assistance that they need so they can move forward with the application so we can get those documents.
Excellent. I have a question here. Maybe you'll be able to answer best. I have a student asking, hello, for the transcripts, can I send a picture of them?
Okay.
They're in English.
Okay, very, very important. Remember that when we're working with institutions, we have a requirement by the U.S. Department of Education to only work with official transcripts. Now, let me regress a little bit here. What that means is that in order for you to begin your program, we have to have the original transcript and a copy of your diploma in your student file. And that transcript stays with the institution, and we're required to maintain it at least for 7 years after you graduate in order for us to maintain compliance with the Department of Education. We can evaluate the transcript, and if it's a copy of it, and we can basically let you know, if you send us the original, this is okay, but we cannot send it to be evaluated because the companies that actually do the evaluation will not accept anything but an official copy. And so as far as us being able to tell you, hey, this looks good, we can work with you, I mean, that's just a matter of giving you the information that you can continue the process. But remember, at some point, we're going to have the original transcript in order for us to be able to recognize it and give you credit for it.
Sir, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Cruz. I have another question here from another prospective student. He says, what if I already have a scholarship?
I don't quite understand the question. You mean if the student have a scholarship in another school, or can you ask that person to be more specific? Because I don't know if he has a scholarship with us or with other institution. Is he thinking, if I transfer to you guys, can you guys help me with the scholarship? It's not clear. I can't.
I'm thinking I took him, Mr. Cruz, as a bright future scholarship, something like that. Like if they have something outside that can benefit towards their education wherever they go, something like a bright future start scholarship.
It depends on the country and depends on the scholarship, because not all scholarships apply to all institutions. And so we would have to be specific on the name of the scholarship, who provide the scholarship, to determine if they accept for the students to come to Atlantis University and be able to use their scholarship.
Understood. So basically, we have to be eligible to receive that scholarship from wherever
Right,
they bring.
and a lot of times it's just a matter of us providing evidence. For example, accreditation, the different agency that actually regulatory agencies that work with us to make sure that people that originate the scholarship, that they're dealing with a legitimate institution.
Excellent, excellent. I have here as well. Let me see. Basically, they're asking, can you please share the presentation, which we're already taking care of that. I have another question here, an interesting question. I'm a female and I did an MBA in Pakistan, but could not have a word of this. I am bank operation manager. Hold on. I will take care of this question, Mr. Cruz. Don't worry.
Well,
For now, it looks like we caught up with all the questions. Are there any other questions or any other concerns so far?
Well, let's do something. Let's give them a minute. So if anybody else wants to add another question to the chat, we have an opportunity here, and Dr. Lima took the time to organize this session, and I want to make sure that we make it worth it.
Excellent. Again, all of them are participating. If you feel like you want to ask another question, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask Director Cruz any questions you might have. Please
Right.
feel free to do so.
You know, for those of you, please, on the icon that your microphone shows, click on it. Please, not all at once. You can also raise your hand, but you can go ahead and unmute your microphone, and I will be happy to answer your questions.
Excellent. It looks like, Mr. Cruz, on the chat, we don't have any more questions. Again, everyone, please, if you want to take care or take advantage of the registration fee waiver, you know what you need to do. Just go on our website, apply now, and we will take care of that registration fee for you, okay?
Very good. Thank you. Dr. Lima?
Yeah, so first of all, Mr. Cruz, thanks a lot. You're always a great partner, so thanks for your participation. I think it was very informative. I think it was wonderful. We're always available, all of our staff, Mr. Cruz, his staff, myself, to answer your questions. We'll defer the questions as needed to the proper people to give you the best answers. But come to see us. If you have any additional questions, always come back to us, ask the questions. We'll be more than glad to help you in any way we can in terms of if it's registration or if it's later, if you're already a student, in terms of career development, your future steps. If you want to join Atlantis University, you're always welcome to come and see us and ask us, email us, and we're always here to help you. I don't know if you want to give us the less more important words.
Just remember, everybody, our job here is to support you. And so please come to us, let us know, see how we can assist you. And that's what we work for. That's what we come to school to assist you. You are actually the institution, our students is our institution. Right. We're here to support you. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'll be happy to answer any other questions at any time individually. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Cruz. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Any questions, any needs, we're here to help you. Have a great time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.